My guest this week is an incredible DJ, producer, and radio presenter. Starting out on the Rinse FM breakfast show, she secured releases on the likes of Toolroom Records, played out at the likes of Glastonbury, Parklife, and Wireless, won the award for music and entertainment at the Women Leaders Awards 2020, and interviewed some of the biggest names in the music and film industry. It's Carly Wilford. Good afternoon, Carly. How are you?
Hi, darling. How are you?
I'm very well. Like we were just saying here, full clarification. This is at the end of January. January, like we were saying, is the start of some people like starting off new sort of ideas and new sort of goals for the end of the year. One of the things I've been putting myself through is dry January, not drinking for the month, feeling healthier for it, feeling a lot more productive, not having hangovers on the weekends. How about yourself?
Yeah, see, I don't really do dry January, but I really appreciate people that do, and fair play, loads of respect. It's really weird, like whenever January comes, I'm this person that on New Year's Eve, I kind of set intentions for the rest of that year. So I'm all about goal setting, moving towards things. I don't love this whole restricting, putting loads of rules in place. So I'm like, I don't know, I kind of write a list of, and I write it in the past tense. So things that I've achieved in 2022, and then I imagine they've already happened. So I'm very much about that, as opposed to, setting things that means you can't do this and you can't do that. I'm a bit of a rule breaker, so I probably wouldn't stick to it. So that's probably why I do it.
Is that manifesting? Is that what it's called? Manifesting? Is that manifesting? Is that what it's called? Like where you write something down and you're putting it into the ether, putting it into the universe?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I work loads with all that stuff, vision boards, and I don't know. I think years ago I read this book called The Secret, and it's about the law of attraction. And from that point, I've kind of done it throughout my career. Like, I'd imagine myself interviewing the people that I wanted to imagine. I imagine myself on stages, even through lockdown. Check this. This is mad when I actually vocalize it, but I used to do live stream gigs and then imagine a crowd of people out in front of me. And so I'd kind of put myself in those situations before they'd happened. So yeah, that's what my goal setting stuff's all about.
Was that because of a lack of, like, when you were, like you said, in lockdown there, like you were missing sort of having that live interaction with people and you were missing that? Or was it sort of, you just felt like you just enjoyed the sets better? How did that make sort of the shows better, or the mixes better, or sort of the whole performance better?
I mean, I've always done it, to be honest. Even when I was playing like dingy East London clubs, I imagined that I was playing at Fabric. And so I just think that if you want to achieve your dreams in this industry, which is hard and it is brutal, then I think even the other day when I was playing Ministry of Sound and there was like 2,000 people in front of me, I was imagining myself at Red Rocks in America, So you're kind of like, okay, I've done this, let's bring it forward. So in lockdown, there was obviously that huge miss of having crowds, but I use lockdown as almost like a boot camp. So as and when the world started to move again, I wanted to be on bigger stages and playing bigger clubs. And so there was part, obviously I was missing it and imagining that, but also wanting to get myself in that place. So as and when things started to move again, I was in a really strong position to be able to play those spaces,
Yeah. What do you sort of think the biggest differences between, it might sound like a silly question, but what do you think the biggest differences between playing those sort of smaller clubs and your set and how you're playing out versus like when you're playing a massive sort of like 1,000 capacity, 2,000, 3,000 capacity room / event? Do you sort of like change your setup at all, or is it sort of the same throughout, like regardless of the sort of venue that you're playing at?
I mean, I came up on playing like the dingiest little clubs in Shoreditch and absolutely lived for it. And I've spoken about this before in interviews, but I used to play like 8 to 12 hour sets sometimes. So I've kind of cut my teeth on having to learn to work the room. So however much I'll ever plan a set, I always switch it up. I have so many different directions that it can go in.
And just because I haven't managed to be able to talk to anybody on the podcast about, look, you touched on there doing back in the day 8 to 12 hour sets, like 8 to 12 hour sort of like mixes. Number one, a couple of questions from that. What's going into the preparation physically for those types of things? Like having to stand there, like, are we talking like eating like loads of certain foods, like drinking certain things, like making sure, because that, like, on its own, like that's like a, like if that's a day's, like a whole day's work type thing, and you're standing there mixing behind the decks, like not moving type of thing. Like, how are you preparing for those types of sets?
I haven't done a set that long for a while. Apart from in my house, I have something called the Rave Cave, which is in my basement. So the last time was probably me and my mates around here having a little mix. and a little party. But you know what? Back in the day, early days, I never used to prepare for them. I used to just turn up and rock up, and that was that. But realizing that being on a mojito diet probably wasn't going to cut it in the long term, because there's just no sustainability in that. There's some places that you play, and actually, the better that you get, venues do look after you. But in the early days, people don't give a shit. You're on £10 an hour. They're like, look, will you
Yeah.
just stand in the corner and play Rihanna, please? And if you went off piece and started to play house music, you get abused. Like,
You might not be able to remember it because it's quite on the spot. What do you reckon the worst thing is that somebody's come up to you and said?
The last one I had was actually on New Year's Eve, and I got pasted. I got
Really?
absolutely pasted for not playing R&B, from various different people. And it was really interesting because I hadn't had that in a really long time. And this girl came up to me and she was like, "Hey babes, no one's dancing." And I was like, right, because there'd just been a band on, right? So everyone had just
Yeah.
gone to get drinks and stuff. And I was playing in a hotel. It wasn't like I was in a club. And she held my hands and she went, "Sweetheart, play Disclosure." And I was just like, oh my
Oh,
God, it was like this passive aggressive kind of moment where you're just like,
yeah.
oh, I forgot about this. And it was like really, I don't know, there was kind of two mixed emotions, right? Because I used to deal with that every weekend and I hadn't dealt with it for so long that it made me realize how far I'd come.
Yeah.
But up and coming DJs, you've been there, just go through it, smile sweetly.
As you're repping the Tool Room jumper there, the Tool Room hoodie as well. Went through the Tool Room Academy. So for the people that aren't aware, Tool Room, a music label, house, tech house, and techno. Was that what you would say it would cover as well?
Yeah, I reckon.
Would you be able to give us a little overview of sort of the Tool Room Academy and the sort of your process of going through it?
Yeah, sure. It's really funny because I've been thinking about making music for a long time. And I remember going to Brighton Music Conference and Tool Room had almost like this little pop up. And I went to go and chat to them and I was like, look, I really want to start making music. And I feel like I've hit a glass ceiling as a DJ and I know this is where I need to go, but I have no idea where to start. And I tried having a little look on like YouTube and I just felt I got completely lost in it and I wasn't really getting anywhere. And so I chatted to them and anyway, long and short of it, they asked me to do some work for them. And they basically emailed me one day and was like, look, Cos, we've got a space on the course. Are you up for it? And it was starting in the January, right? So the lockdown happened in the March. And so I kind of dedicated 3 months in that January to go, look, if that means I have to cut back on gigs to get this done,
Mm.
because it was like a pretty full on course. Like it was a boot camp of a course. It wasn't easy. I kind of put aside that time. And so obviously then when lockdown happened, I was already in my course
Mm.
and my work had stopped. So it meant that I had all that time to completely fully focus on learning how to make music. But the academy is absolutely brilliant. And they work very much with like, they teach you about how to break down a track and, how to then build from like kick, drum, bass line, hi-hats, etc. And then over those 3 months, they help you to create a finished track. And I just absolutely soaked it up and loved it. I found it really hard because I was so used to being a DJ. You're quite busy, you're quite active. So sitting down in front of a computer day in, day out and trying to understand what on earth an EQ is and, why have you got to compress this and, what's automation and all of this stuff that I just had no bloody idea about any of it. It just became my focus through lockdown. And I think I feel so blessed to have had that because it was almost like my foundation that kind of when I didn't know what was going on and the world seemed a bit crazy, I just kind of went back and was like, right, let's go back to this beat.
But obviously, it has done well because the BBC introducing track of the week. Obviously, all of that has been paid off. All of the course has paid off. It's all come around through. How did that come around?
Oh, I mean, I'm just off the back of this, right? So I've had the most crazy week and it's been amazing. So I'm from Northampton. I used to live in London for a long time, just before lockdown, moved back here. And so when Generation X, which was my first track, came out, I decided to put it on the BBC Introducing uploader. And so it went to BBC Introducing in Northampton and they've really backed it and been really supportive. And off the back of their first play, it then went to Jaguar on Radio 1. Annie Mac then played it. Danny Howard then played it. So it kind of almost went on this journey. And that was over the course of a few months. It didn't happen instantly. It kind of went BBC introduced Northampton,
Mm-hmm.
Jaguar, Annie Mac, Danny Howard. It kind of went on this journey. So I knew that it was possible that if I made the right track, it could go further. But I didn't quite imagine that this is what would happen. So I then released a couple of other tracks. One was a bit more, they're both a bit more underground, a bit more for the club, because even though I wanted to put stuff out that was accessible for radio, I still wanted to be able to play my tunes in a club and it go off, you know. So I did a couple of releases of that. And then We Rise I wrote in lockdown, and actually talking about what clubbing would be like when everything reopened again. Put it on the BBC Introduce and Uploader. And then I got a message from Kerry Koch, I think it's Kerry Koch. And she said to me, "Oh, just to let you know, I've kind of put this forward to the team at Radio 1. And I just kind of sat patiently and didn't really think much more of it. And then I went on holiday to the Maldives, and I was in the airport on the way home, and I'd had like a bit of an emotional time because a few months before I'd broken up with my ex, and I kind of was going through a few bits like personally. I'm a bit of a hippie, so I kind of done this meditation at the airport of all places, because I was at the airport really early. I remember sitting at sunset. I remember almost having a real word with myself and being like, look, if you want to go into this next phase of your life, you're going to have to let a lot of this shit go. And I remember just sitting there and I just cried because I'd been through so much and I felt so ready to move on to the next level of my career and where I wanted to go. But I didn't know how that was going to shape itself. And I didn't know in what form that was going to come in. But I knew this stuff that I'd been through was holding me back because I wasn't letting it go. So anyway, had a little cry. You know, Maldives is amazing, by the way, because the airport, you're by the sea. So you pull up to the airport in a boat. And so I'd sat literally by the sea doing this. Anyway. So
that's where you want to have a cry, to be honest.
Exactly.
By the sea, just the sun's out. If you're going to have a cry, if you're going to have a cleanse, you at least want to be getting a tan while you're doing it.
I was on my own though, mates. People must have thought I was fucking mental because like, is she all right?
Maybe they just thought it was like, oh, it's such a beautiful place. It's just really got to her. It's so emotional. Like it's really touching. It's really touching there.
I mean, I have been known to cry at the odd sunset, but not to this extreme. So anyway, at that moment, I dusted myself off, had a word with myself. Wilford, sort your life out. Come on, let's go. You're going to be fine. Walked into the airport and got some Wi-Fi, and I was in the queue waiting to like check in. Because I was on my own, I was just scrolling on my phone, and then I scrolled at my phone, and that minute I just had this email pop through from Radio 1 saying it's going to be track of the week on the 14th of January. And then obviously cried again because I've just been crying about the fact I've got to let this
0 to 100. That is 0 to 100 proper quick, isn't it?
But doesn't it show, like, sometimes you're the person that's blocking your path because you're not allowing yourself to be in flow of your life? And so it was just the most nuts thing because being there on your own, you had no one to share it with. So I was a bit like, well, that's weird. And so yet again, I'm in the queue crying. People must have thought I was odd. Then I just phoned my sister. I was like, you're not.
I was going to say, who's the first person you let know? Your sister.
Yeah. I've got my younger sister called Kimberly. She's amazing. And she's just like, her and I chat all day. She's like my little go-to when life stuff happens. But then it was like this moment of being like, right, I need to get myself ready because I knew this was coming. And this was probably like 5-6 weeks away from when I first knew about it. So, you know, making sure from that point onwards, I was busy making other music and having other stuff ready because, you know, you only really get that chance once. And I knew that them backing me and being played on shows like Scott Mills and Greg James and Adele Roberts and Ariel Freed, like that's daytime radio, right? So that's them saying, you know, watch out for Carly Wilford and then backing you, which, you know, was pretty overwhelming and amazing because it's what you work all those endless hours in front of the computer for, you know? So yeah, it was a bit of a mad time, but I think in life, you know, if you want something, you have to put yourself out there and you have to work really hard to make it happen. And I've never been afraid of that. I've never been afraid of hard work and just, you know, digging deep when things get tough. And even if that means that it's looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, what's my part in this? What can I do better? How can I move myself out of the way? What do I need to move on from? And that's what I'd done at the airport. And it was almost instant, crazy.
To go from something that is absolutely really fantastically positive and great and flip it on its head. What sort of obviously we want to get sort of a balance in the music industry, and other guests we've had on have discussed different parts of their industry and different parts of their journey so far within the industry and their experiences. What's sort of like the worst thing, either DJing wise or producing wise or playing out wise, or just sort of the worst thing that you've experienced during sort of like your music industry career?
So, I mean, I did warn you about this before we came on, but it's not pretty, if I'm honest. Um, and it was really funny because when I first moved to London, I didn't really know anybody and I didn't really like understand the music industry. And so trying to find my way, and bearing in mind this wasn't as a DJ, this was as a presenter. I used to have to go around to events and clubs, and I'd find myself in all sorts of dodgy situations because London's a big place, right? And it's a big city, and people don't know you. They don't care about you, majority of the time. You meet people that are like fleeting friends that you'll go to events with or, won't ever see again. And I remember trying to come up as a presenter, trying to, interview people on the red carpet and run around the city with my camera and my microphone. And I remember I'd moved to Angel. So I was living in like near East London, like Northeast. And I remember you used to get these nights where you go to this was in Kensington. I think it was a place called, I remember going there. And if you knew the promoter, you were allowed on the table and, all of this. And then you'd get drinks. And I remember going with a mate of mine and we both had a glass of champagne and we were drinking, pair of us. Guy comes along, tops up our glass of champagne. And I don't really remember much apart from waking up in a police station and trying to piece together everything that had gone on. But basically my drink got spiked and pretty badly. And I basically got taken by a gang. And so I left the club and I got into what I thought was a taxi to take me home. And it was a gang car. And that experience changed me for a very, very long time. Because for a start, you're in that city on your own. No one even knows this has happened to you.
Yeah.
No one knows. And also, it's really interesting because very recently this spiking thing had happened in the local town where I'm from.
Yeah.
And someone asked me to talk about it. And I was a bit like, I don't know if I want to go there because it wasn't very nice. And that experience, I mean, I stopped drinking for a year. I stopped going out. I couldn't eat meat. Like I suddenly became veggie. It was really weird. It kind of gave me a massive wake-up call. And I think seeing that that's now still happening, and especially in the town where I'm from, I found really disturbing. And, as a girl, and I'm pretty streetwise and quite smart, you hope that's never going to happen to you. And when it does, I mean, I was very, very lucky. And there's a lot more detail that I could go into of things that happened along the way, but I ended up on the same night. The gang had taken me to this place and I managed to escape. But if anyone who's watching this has ever had Rohypnol or something similar, it takes out your legs. Like you can't move, like you can't hardly walk. So trying to run like I was in heels at the time to get away from this gang was pretty crazy situation. But one of the gang members at the time had helped me to get away. It's just mad even talk about it. Anyway, long and short of it, the rest of the gang found that he'd helped me. And I was in this industrial estate in the middle of Hounslow, mad. And I remember him looking at me and he looked at me dead in the eye and he looked at my bag and the gang had driven around the corner and was screaming at him because obviously they didn't want me to get away, right? And then he looked at me and he mugged me. And so he took my bag with my phone, my house keys, my money. And so I'm on an industrial estate in Hounslow. Had no idea where I was because I didn't know I was in Hounslow at the time. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how I was going to get home. And it was like probably 3-4 in the morning. So yeah, that kind of as a situation changed everything for me, really, and taught me that I needed to stop walking that line where you think that, you're invincible. And I think that was such a big lesson for me and one that kind of made me realize how precious life is and that maybe at that time I was probably pushing it a bit too far. But I was very lucky. And I remember the police they thought it had been a lot worse of a situation than it had. And I remember them saying to me, look, Carly, whatever happened that night, it was almost like someone was looking over you, because
Mm.
let me tell you this, there was other people that we dealt with that night that weren't as lucky. And so, yeah, I don't know, but that's probably the worst. And I did warn you, it's not a pretty conversation. I also think that in this job, you have to be straight, and you can live this Instagram life where everything's like, oh, here's the rosy part of my life, but then also here's the fucking cold hard reality, and this stuff can happen. And so I think it's really important that when you go out, you have each other's backs, you look after each other, you are aware that the world can be a crazy place at times, but also you have a responsibility to yourself to make sure you're looking after yourself. And I think, in the music industry, you can get lost. There's moments where it is full on foot to the floor hedonism if you want it.
Mm.
But then there also comes a point where it's like, how far are you going to take this? Because at the end of the day, you can blame other people for why you're in these situations, or you can look at yourself and be like, right, from now on, I'm going to take responsibility for myself. I'm not going to drink as much. I'm going to make sure that I train. I'm going to make sure I eat healthy. I look after myself, because, whilst that situation was absolutely awful, I think, and for my family as well, because I had to phone my mom at like 5 a.m. or whatever time it was on a landline, because I had no one's numbers, and tell her what had happened.
Mm.
That's a hard thing for a parent to have to hear at the other end of the phone. But I think from that point onwards, I gave myself a big talking to that, you're a human being. You're here and you have to be responsible for your life. And I don't think I think I was probably knee deep in the London party scene and, probably pushing it a bit far, if I'm honest.
I'm speechless.
I told you. I did warn you.
You did, yeah. You did. Yeah. Before we recorded the podcast, you were like, yeah, we'll go into this story. But do you want to talk about it? And I was like, yep, absolutely, we'll talk about it. But I'm just processing. I'm still processing what you said there. To be honest, that is absolutely horrendous.
But it
And
still
obviously,
happens.
was there like an investigation into like whoever was running the party?
Yeah, they went to the club. They saw me get into the cab. They couldn't get the information. They never found who did it. They tried to get other CCTV from the other parts of the street and they couldn't. What's interesting is the girl that I was with also got put in a cab, but she actually got put in a proper cab. Mine was a gang car, because as they left, I got into the cab with just one person. They obviously watched me, because by this point, I think we both just looked like we were white wine drunk, I think.
Mm.
They then, because they put us in cabs, I think, or I got in a cab, and then they drove round the corner, and then the other gang members got in the car, and I remember it really clearly. I remember
Fucking
them all
hell.
getting in and thinking, "Oh shit!" And then that was that. It was like, yeah, it was crazy, but this is reality of living in a big city. You have to literally be careful. And as a girl, I think, even as a guy, you have to have your own back. And I think, sometimes you think these things are never going to happen to you, but you still hear stories, and this stuff does still happen on a weekend right now in 2022. I did warn you. It was a pretty bleak story, so apologies for that. We were having a lovely chat, weren't we?
There's no need to apologise at all. It's there's no need to apologise at all. It's like you said, it's important for people to hear the balance and to hear for the other side, for the whole spectrum of the music industry. Like you said, people can see things through rose tinted glasses. Social media is what it's like everyone's CV, isn't it? Everybody is having the best time in the world. This is what I've done. This is what it is. Obviously, thank you for being open and honest about that experience and being able to shed some light on, like you said, giving the balance of what it is like in the music industry and what it is like to live in the city and what it is like to go somewhere and sort of start something fresh. So some of the potential that can happen, like you said, you can have all of these incredible opportunities and create these incredible experiences. But unfortunately, there are obviously the other sides to that, which is absolutely horrendous.
But it's also life, right? And in life, you have to have negative experiences, or what we perceive as negative. That's how you grow. That's how you evolve. Like I say, after that, I stopped drinking for a year. It was probably the best thing that could happen to me. Even though in that situation at that time, you don't always know why this is happening. And, it was brutal. But I think, in our generation, we can always want, there's this toxic positivity, stay positive, you've got to do this. No, life isn't that. Like, look to nature. look at how that works. We need to be more like that. And I think, social media has that whole thing of everything's great. And actually, behind that, people can be struggling with their mental health. They can be in abusive relationships. They can have stuff like this happen all the time. And I think, you know, it's a responsibility, isn't it, when you start to get a following and you start to have an audience, because however much I don't want to feed negative stuff all the time and I want to show people you can create stuff in your life,
Mm.
bad stuff is going to happen. Like it or not, we are human. People that you care about are going to hurt you. There's going to be people along the way that are going to pass away, and it's going to be heartbreaking. But you need that stuff. And we can shy away from it, and you don't always want to witness it and you don't always want to go through it, but unfortunately that's why we're here. And sometimes it's those big lessons that are the things that actually make you as a human being.
Carly, it's been fantastic to chat to you this evening. It's very interesting to hear, because you have got such a massive show reel. You have got so many experiences in the industry, from presenting, from producing, from DJing, from interviewing people on the red carpet, off the red carpet, like film stars, music stars, having radio play now, presenting. Like you've touched so many corners of the music industry, and have shared sort of like your roots into the music industry and sort of where you've allowed yourself to go and where you've worked yourself to go, and you haven't just necessarily gone down one route and gone like, you know what, I'm just going to follow this through that. Like you've suddenly gone like, right, I've achieved this, I've done this, what's the sort of next step? I can sidestep across, I can sort of, you know what, I can go down this road if I need to, because I've got this skill set and because I've managed to work hard enough and I've managed to like put enough effort into this sort of avenue, whether it's broadcasting, whether it's DJing, whether it's producing, whether it's interviewing and presenting and other bits and pieces like that. It's just demonstrating into listeners and viewers that regardless of whatever section you are in the music industry, or even if you haven't really stepped foot into it yet, that you're never sort of pigeonholed. You're never pigeonholed at all. You can go whichever direction you want, as long as you can obviously put your, as cheesy as it sounds, as long as you do put your mindset to it, and as long as you do sort of have that mentality to it, there's sort of nothing really stopping you.
Yeah, of course. And just be consistent as well. Like if you say you're going to do something, do it and follow through with it. And, you know, there's so many different avenues that you can take now. And also what's really interesting is you don't always have to go to the big cities anymore. The internet has kind of thrown it all open. So I think that feels really almost, I don't know, just so exciting again, because you can take any route that you want. And there's so many people that are doing so many different things. And I think, the music industry is a very special place. And I feel so blessed to have worked in very different areas. But the main thing for me is the music. And as long as you always bring it back to that and keep that at its core, then you'll have a very long and happy career in it.
Carly, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for jumping on the episode.
Thanks for having me.